the experiment that escaped its creators. It started as a quiet idea, buried in code and shared on obscure forums. No leaders, no borders, no permission required. And yet, it would slip beyond control faster than anyone imagined. To understand why this experiment matters today, we need to return to a moment of deep mistrust. The global financial system had just fractured under its own weight. Banks collapsed, governments intervened, and ordinary people paid the price. Confidence in institutions eroded, replaced by a growing sense that the rules favored only a few. Out of that disillusionment came a radical question. What if money didn't need trust in people at all? The idea promised something revolutionary. A system where math replaced authority, where transactions verified themselves, where no central power could rewrite the rules. At first, it felt like a technical curiosity, interesting but contained, a niche experiment for cryptographers and idealists. But beneath the surface, something larger was forming. The design was deceptively simple, a shared ledger distributed across countless machines, each participant validating the system together. No single point of failure, no master switch to turn it off. What made it powerful was not speed or convenience. It was resilience. Early adopters weren't chasing wealth. They were chasing autonomy. They believed code could protect freedom better than institutions ever had. Each transaction was a quiet act of defiance. Each block added reinforced the idea that control could be optional. But experiments have a way of evolving. As more people joined, the system hardened. Rules became more difficult to change. The network grew stronger precisely because no one controlled it. And slowly, almost invisibly, this experiment began to escape its original boundaries. What was designed to resist power started attracting it. Attention followed, then capital, then influence. And with each new participant, the stakes grew higher. Nobody noticed a turning point when curiosity became consequence. There was no announcement, no single moment of realization, just a gradual shift as the experiment stopped being theoretical. It began interacting with the real world, with markets, with laws, with human ambition. And that's when the original question changed. It was no longer whether the system could exist. It was whether anyone could stop it. As the network expanded, its neutrality began to blur. What once felt like a shared experiment started revealing uneven advantages. Those who arrived early gained influence without asking for it. Those with stronger machines processed more transactions. Power, it turned out, could reappear even without leaders. The system rewarded participation, but not equally. Computational strength mattered. Energy access mattered. Geography mattered. What was meant to be decentralized slowly clustered around those with resources. The rules never changed, yet outcomes did. And that difference became impossible to ignore. At first, these imbalances seemed harmless. After all, no one could rewrite history. Every transaction remained visible. Every rule remained public. But influence doesn't always need permission. It only needs scale. And scale was growing fast. As value entered the system, incentives shifted. The motivation was no longer ideological. It became economic. Participants optimized for reward, not principles. Efficiency replaced idealism. Competition replaced cooperation. The network adapted, just as it was designed to do. With growth came attention from the outside world. Developers debated upgrades. Users argued over direction. Splits emerged, not from failure, but from disagreement. The code was open, yet consensus became fragile. Every change risked division. Meanwhile, institutions began watching closely. Banks studied the mechanics. Regulators examined the implications. Governments asked uncomfortable questions. Once the system crossed that invisible line into infrastructure, pressure followed. Every major financial system eventually faces the same test. Who bears responsibility when incentives collide with reality? This experiment was no different, only harder to contain. As transaction volumes surged, cracks began to show. The network could not grow infinitely without friction. Congestion increased. Fees rose. What once felt open began to feel competitive. Access was no longer guaranteed by belief alone. It was earned through cost. These constraints forced uncomfortable choices. Should the system prioritize speed or security, accessibility or resilience? Every proposal divided the community further. There was no final authority to decide, only rough consensus, fragile and slow. When consensus failed, fragmentation followed. New versions emerged. Identical histories split into different futures, each claiming legitimacy, each insisting the other had betrayed the original vision. What was once a single experiment became multiple realities. At the same time, external forces moved faster. Speculators flooded in. Price volatility overshadowed purpose. Headlines replaced understanding. For many newcomers, the system wasn't philosophy. It was a gamble, a chance to escape traditional constraints overnight. This shift changed behavior across the network. Short-term incentives dominated. Risk tolerance increased. Complex financial products wrapped themselves around something never designed for them. Leverage amplified gains. And losses, governments could no longer ignore it. Capital controls weakened. Sanctions leaked. Tax systems struggled to keep up. The experiment had become a loophole in global finance. Not through malice, through design. Attempts to regulate it exposed a paradox. To control it directly was impossible. To control its touchpoints risked pushing activity underground. Each action produced unintended consequences. Every restriction created new workarounds. Attempts to regulate it exposed a paradox. To control it directly was impossible. To control its touchpoints risked pushing activity underground. Each action produced unintended consequences. Every restriction created new workarounds. Meanwhile, energy consumption surged. Security demanded computation. Computation demanded power. And power came with cost. Environmental concerns moved from footnotes to headlines. What was once invisible now left a physical footprint. Supporters argued the system was still young. Critics argued the damage was already real. Both were correct, because the experiment wasn't failing. It was maturing, and maturity revealed a truth many weren't ready to face. A system without centralized control doesn't eliminate power. It redistributes it, often unevenly, often quietly. By the time this realization set in, retreat was no longer an option. Too much value, too much dependence, too much momentum. The experiment had escaped not just its creators, it had escaped its original purpose. The climax arrived quietly, without a single dramatic collapse. Instead, it unfolded through accumulation, more users, more capital, more dependence, until one day, the experiment was no longer optional. Financial institutions began integrating it. Corporations added it to balance sheets. Entire industries formed around securing, trading, and managing it. What was once designed to exist outside the system became entangled within it, not as rebellion, but as reinforcement. This was the paradox at the heart of the experiment. In trying to remove trust, it created new forms of reliance. In trying to avoid authority, it generated new centers of influence, not elected, not appointed, but encoded. The climax was not a crash. It was normalization, a realization that digital money would not replace the system overnight, nor would it remain separate from it. Instead, it would reshape it from the inside, slowly, invisibly, irreversibly. The original creators had faded into myth, their intentions debated, their identities speculated, but the system no longer needed them. It followed its own logic now, governed by incentives, not ideals, by momentum, not vision. This is where the story becomes uncomfortable, because the experiment succeeded, not in the way it promised, but in the way systems often do, by adapting to power rather than dissolving it. The resolution is not about failure or triumph. It is about transformation, a reminder that technology does not erase human behavior. It amplifies it, at scale. What began as a response to mistrust became a mirror, reflecting how societies handle freedom, risk, and responsibility. The code was neutral. The outcomes were not. And today, as digital systems quietly weave themselves into everyday finance, this story matters more than ever. Because the question was never just about money. It was about who controls the rules when no one is in charge. The experiment escaped its creators, but it did not escape us. We are now part of it. The